Hi, everyone. I can slowly start to see everyone trickling in, which is so exciting. First of all, I just want to say welcome back to Breakout Beauty's UK How to Break Out in 2026 webinar series. And my name is Sonia. I will be your moderator for today. And I am joined by Paul, co-founder of Growth Studio and program architect of the Breakout Beauty program. And today we're joined by two very special guests, Ning from the Beauty Crop and Daisy from Glow For It, of which we will give a much deeper and much more better introduction than I will right now. But whilst we are waiting for everyone to come in, I want to say thank you for joining us. Today's episode is how we got our beauty brands into boots and how you can do it too, told by none other than Ning and Daisy. And we're really here today to give you guys what we call the real playbook for founders who've actually done it. Now, before we dive in, I would like to quickly go through some housekeeping. First of all, why don't you all introduce yourselves in the chat? If you're a beauty founder, we'd love to have your name dropped and your brand because we would like to check you out after this webinar. And then back to the webinar. Today, we will have you for about an hour, of which half hour we'll dedicate to a fireside chat style between Ning, Daisy, and Paul, where we're gonna get into the nitty-gritty of their just like founder journey, as we like to say. And then we'll dedicate the last 30 to 25 minutes for Q&A. And this is where I want everybody here that's joined us today to check out on your icon for the Q&A. And you can start dropping questions as we go along, but this is where we're going to get to at the end of the webinar, and we'll start asking any questions you want directed to anybody in the webinar today. And last few things to keep in mind, it will be recorded. So if anyone wants to miss something or they want to check it out after it's done, keep an eye out on your emails and it will be sent there. And another thing that you will receive from us today once the webinar closes is a quick survey. It will take you less than a minute, but it would really, really help us out if you filled it in because we'll actually be able to shape the next webinars coming up, of which we've actually managed to do that for some of the episodes that we've got lined up for next month. So that is all for me. Paul, I'm going to leave it off to you now.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sonia. So we're delighted, as Sonia said, to be joined by Ning and Daisy today. We're going to be exploring the practical tips of how they got into retail, what the process was, how they started that journey, what's changed in their business as they've done it. So we're going to go a little bit deep. So if you're a founder, take notes. This is going to be very much focused on what you can do and learn from them. Before we start, just a big announcement to make that tomorrow we officially launched our second Breakout Beauty program. So if you're a startup founder out there and you want to be the next Ning or the next Daisy, this is the perfect program. It's a 10-week program. It's completely free and it's designed to help people like you understand how to get into retail, how to create and implement a sustainable social commerce strategy like TikTok Shop, how to try and get the money to help you afford to do that, if that's investment, if that's debt, how to raise your profile, become famous, and ultimately unlock all of those potential barriers to becoming a brilliant multi-million-pound global brand. All details will be on our website, growstudio.com/breakoutbeauty tomorrow. Sonia will put it on a link. Keep out for our LinkedIn, our socials, and the press. But we'd love you to join us and go on the journey. So with that in mind, let's get straight into it. I think I should just have one little caveat that we are in a great location in central Soho, but the Wi-Fi does seem to be a little bit sketchy. So if it falls out, then Sonia might have to take over for a second or two.
Yeah, I think we may have lost Daisy for a split second, just FYI. But that may be what's happening.
Awesome. We'll try and work around it. So
but we keep it rolling.
We'll start with Ning. So Ning, I'd love you to take a few seconds to introduce yourself, the beauty crop, how the beauty crop came about and where you are today.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Ning, the founder of the Beauty Crop. We're actually a skincare meets makeup beauty brand, and I started the business almost 12 years ago now. And I actually came into beauty in a pretty unconventional way because I started life as a chemical engineer. Then I went into investment banking before pivoting into beauty in my mid to late 30s. I started the brand because I wanted to solve a very personal problem, which is for me creating color cosmetics that work for my sensitive eczema-prone skin while bringing that fun, joyful color cosmetics to color cosmetics basically, and ultimately our mission is to bring that to the mass beauty aisles and disrupt the mass beauty aisles as it is. Today, we're in 115 boot stores across permanent fixtures and edit ends, and retail has become a key part of our growth journey. I can go into more detail, but yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And kudos to all of you who have joined because honestly, being a founder is such a lonely journey, and you are such brave people for taking that step already. So yeah, I think it's a wonderful program that Paul and Sonia are part of. So yeah, I love being part of Breakup Beauty.
Thank you. And I should have also said that Daisy and Ning are part of our board of experts. So, fantastic entrepreneurs, well-known entrepreneurs who are sharing their experiences with the cohort throughout. Daisy, are you there? No. I'll come back to you. Ning, in terms of retail, was that, from the very start, was retail always a deliberate strategy for you? Was it always part of the roadmap for growth, or was it something that that came up a bit more organically?
Yeah, I mean, for us, our brand ethos and brand DNA really was to disrupt the mass beauty aisles. I think my pain point was that I couldn't find better formulated color cosmetics. And so, my part of the journey was always to bring our brand into mass beauty aisles. And yeah, and affordability is a key part of our brand ethos. So it has been part of the brand strategy, but because we've been around for 12 years, I feel like we've had 9 lives. Because when I started the brand 12 years ago, actually, we took off in the States first. And 3 months into building the brand, we got onboarded with Urban Outfitters in the States. And then from there, we actually were retail in Macy's in the States again. So the US was a key part of our journey. And then COVID hit, and then I feel like the next journey began. We pivoted into D2C just because POs dried up overnight. And so we needed to survive. We pivoted into D2C and we became one of the first earliest adopters of TikTok Shop in 2022, which feels like eons ago now. But yeah, and now, 2024 was our first foray into stores back into stores in the UK. So yeah, I feel like it has been part of the strategy. It's just taken a few turns.
Yeah. And I'm going to try Daisy. Do we have you, Daisy? No.
Can you hear me?
We can. Sorry, Daisy
You
and I are
can.
in this workplace, but Daisy, we can hear you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi's being so temperamental. I was nearly going to come into the same room as you, Paul, and then I was like, is that just strange? But hopefully,
No,
yeah.
I'll switch my video off as well. Daisy, yeah, would love to introduce you for a minute. How did Glow for It start off? What were you doing before Glow for It, and how did it come about?
I might just come in with you.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's kicked me out. Apologies,
Sorry.
everyone. I keep getting kicked out. Hi. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sorry, Daisy. So in terms of Glow for It, how did Glow for It first come about? What was your background pre this crazy life of being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I guess quite differently to Ning, I was actually at university. So I was doing a degree in musical theatre, so very different to kind of a finance background. But I was actually in my third year of university when we went into lockdown. So it was kind of an accumulation of experiences from university. I went to drama school, which was very stress inducing. And one of my biggest kind of habits that I kind of manifested from drama school was picking out my natural lashes and making wishes. So by the time we reached lockdown, that was kind of a real pause in my life for the first time. And I'd always been on this train of training, dancing. So yeah, having that moment to pause and reflection, I often think if it wasn't for lockdown, that time wouldn't have happened, and I probably would have carried on down that line. So yeah, my background was very much in, I guess, content effectively. Usually content in the form of like performing, but actually it was very transferable into kind of what the foundations of Glow For It was built on, which was connecting directly with our customer, storytelling, authenticity. So the ability to just have me, myself, and a tripod and a camera and connecting directly with a customer, I say in the early days was really one of our biggest superpowers.
And you're now in, it's very strange.
Sorry.
You're now in retail with,
yes.
For context, how many stores, what stores are you in?
Yeah, so we launched last March on the Ignite project, which is the very exciting project that you guys are kind of partnered with. And the amazing team from Boots initially reached out to us because they'd seen the kind of trending nature of the products, particularly through social media, and saw an opportunity to bring that virality into real life opportunity. So we launched initially with 50 stores on Ignite. To give also some perspective to our team size at the time, we only had about 4 full-time employees. So for me at this stage of the business, it was a big leap of faith. It took a lot of internal kind of resource. But it was an incredible opportunity. And when Boots come knocking, you don't kind of shut the door. So we did everything we could to make it feasible and possible. We launched initially in the March into 50 stores. And then by the July, we've been rolled out to a further 150 stores, which is a really exciting, strong indicator of sell-through. And that initial Ignite project lasted for us about 6 months. So that took us to the October. And then our actual category, so we fall within the accessories category, has 2 rebuilds a year, one of which is in September, the other is in March. So we've now just fallen into that March rebuild and we've gone into just shy of 400 stores.
Amazing. Incredible.
So yeah, within the space of a year, what was kind of a non-existent B2B model within the business, bar a few e-retailers, has suddenly become kind of a fully fledged kind of portion of the business that we're hoping to grow and scale.
Perfect. And you both had quite different routes into retail. So obviously, Daisy, you came through Ignite, which was a initiative set up to try and fast track and make it easier. Ning, you took quite an interesting approach to Boots and the large retail in the sense that you didn't want to go to pitch to them, you wanted them to come to you. Is that right?
Oh, Ning's just on mute.
I think you might be on mute. Mute, Ning.
Oh, sorry. Fat fingers. To be completely candid, I actually have two stories to tell you. One of caution and one which is now, a great pivot into wholesale. But actually, we were initially in Superdrug in late 2018 to 2019. And when we were brought into Superdrug, remember Superdrug used to have those trend zones? So that's where they almost have a similar style like Ignite, whereby they put new brands onto trend zones. And quite honestly, in 2019, we were a much different brand than we were then than we are now. Looking back, our brand awareness was nowhere where it is currently. We didn't fully understand, sell-through rates in store, and then we weren't tracking performance tightly enough. And, all that culmination was that obviously in late 20 in 2020 COVID hit as well, so we also got delisted. So I would say that while I can say COVID was to blame for it, the honest truth was, the sell-through rate wasn't strong enough, and it 6 months later COVID hit. But ultimately, yeah, I think it was one of those cautionary tales where it's quite dangerous when a buyer really likes you, because sometimes you might not be ready. So we weren't ready in 2019. But then Boots came around in 2024. And like what Paul said, actually our approach was to get them to approach us, because while we were winning on D2C on TikTok Shop, I guess we were very vocal about our sell-through data on LinkedIn. I personally I was like putting on LinkedIn, okay, this is what we did this month, or putting out, as much as possible key features of new products, for instance. And yeah, I think that changed everything based on my previous experience with Superdrug. This time with Boots in 2024, we had leverage in negotiations, better payment terms, stronger commercial positioning. So yeah, I think my cautionary tale is that retail success isn't just about getting in, it's about um, ensuring you have that sell-through rate.
And we'll talk about sell-through rate in a couple of minutes, because I think it's a critical part that a lot of founders don't necessarily consider or have the unit economics for or have the budget for. But just in terms of first getting into retail, Ning, you're saying you were in Urban Outfitters and Superdrug and Boots, and you went first into Boots. Like,
Yeah.
what
Ooh, I think we may have had a
retailers
moment.
that you can
Oh.
go out for? What should you be looking out for to make sure you go to the right one or right ones?
Yeah, I think fully trans.
Paul, Daisy,
Always had it on
I'm
my
sorry
mood board.
to interrupt you both. We lost you for a split second. So can I ask Paul to repeat your question and Daisy to answer again? We don't want to miss anything that's being said. Now I'm wondering if we may have lost them altogether. Let's give them about 30 seconds to see if they're going to reappear, just have a little see if they're coming up. Okay, we may be noticing a bit of a tech issue. That's fine. We continue on. Ning, I don't know if maybe you've picked up any part of that question of whether or not there's anything you wanted to answer from there. Otherwise, I'll be happy to move on.
Uh, sure, sure. I think I've answered most of it.
Okay, no worries. In that case, let's keep going until Paul and Daisy join us. I'm just going to have a quick scan on what we can also discuss today while we wait. So I see here, oh, Paul, Daisy,
Quite quiet.
we're back.
We are. I'm so sorry for this.
That's all right. Should
We're in a
I just
we're in a
wanted
bit
to
of
make,
sorry. Go on, Sonia.
no, no, okay, it's all good. This happens. I just wanted to make sure, Paul, if you could repeat your question and Daisy to respond to the question. We just want to make sure we're not missing anything from what you were saying. And perhaps, I don't know if everyone agrees, maybe you can turn off also your video in case the Wi-Fi is a bit slow. At the end of the day, we want the content. Ning, for you, you can keep it on. Your Wi-Fi is perfectly fine. I was more for a suggestion of amazing. Okay, guys, start over. Paul and Daisy, off to you.
Okay, so it's about deliberate choice about which retailers to go after.
Yeah.
And how do you choose the right retailer when there are so many options out there?
Yeah, I think for us having a really strong kind of alignment to core business and brand values. One of the biggest things for Glow For It has always been about accessibility when we look at kind of the market of lash serums and the price point often associated. So for us, having a space that was accessible, built on authenticity and trust. Boots is ultimately a pharmacy, so it is built on that kind of trust of real ingredients that are going to give you solutions. So for us, when we looked at the retail landscape, it was okay, which retailer aligns most with our core values. So Boots had always been on kind of that vision board for us. I think what I was mentioning to Paul just before we got cut off is that actually probably in our journey we were still quite early. I didn't actually have retail in our kind of pathway for at least 6 months before we were actually approached by Boots. But I also think there is a bit of a beauty in that. As a small startup business, you do have the ability to pivot and take those opportunities as they come. And I don't think you can be super rigid in your decision making. So the ability to flex where opportunities lie is probably a superpower that we have at this stage of business. So for us, really leaning into that and then growing with Boots, I think we'll probably touch on it, but we don't have the budgets of a Sol de Janeiro. So what can we actually have within our arsenal that's still going to give that value to Boots, but in a way that's appropriate to our size and scale and still make that sell through work?
And I think one of the challenges a lot of brands go through is that essentially it's a real estate game. You go into the shelf of a Boots, and they're hoping that you're going to sell more than the other brand that could have been in there. And when you first start having conversations with retailers, what were the things that they were asking for? Because for a lot of brands like yourselves, when you first start speaking to large retailers, you're essentially unknowns in terms of they may have seen your brand, they may have seen you trending, but they don't have the mechanics of the business underneath. What were the questions, Ning, I'll start with you. What were the questions that you were being asked for by retailers when you first approached them? What should founders expect to be grilled upon?
Yeah, I think when they do initially have those discussions, you should probably, as a basic, have a brand deck, right? So brand deck is the first thing that they ask for. I think if you've got a unique positioning within market, to ensure you outline that within your brand deck, and then also make sure you vocalize about it. I think also what they typically ask for is a line sheet. So, retail pricing along with a proposal of what your margins you want to offer them. They typically ask you for your offer first and then they beat you down on it. And then they would also, I would say that they would want to see, your socials. So, I don't know if this resonates as much anymore, but perhaps follower base, but also engagement levels within social, because it also is a key indicator of how your brand resonates within its customer base. And if you are relatively young and new, I think that's fine too, but just be candid on perhaps what tractions you have, your like for instance, your email list, if that's more impressive than the social following. And then I think they also would want to understand what your rate of sale typically is for your best-selling SKU. So perhaps, try and prepare that. And then also, I think from our perspective, they I think you get into another set of discussions around, your marketing strategy and what NPD you're looking to bring forward. I think buyers typically are excited for NPD. So yeah, I think a bunch of this, which I think most people would have within their brand deck.
And Ning, would you say that it's a meet them and pitch, or is it a relationship that you nurture over time? Your very first session with a buyer from a retailer that you want, how should you operate that session?
I think if as much as possible, make the effort to go and see them face to face. Meeting face to face is always much more effective because, as much as, people want to say business can be done on a Zoom call. Actually, I always believe that if you can meet that buyer face to face, take that, that train up to Nottingham, spend the day there, it's always much better. But yeah, if you can't, then Zoom calls also equally fine.
Ultimately, you're building a long-term relationship with the buyer and the brand. But before you do, like Daisy, people in your position, so obviously you came into retail very, very, very quickly. You're a smaller brand, you hadn't been in retail before. There's a clear power imbalance between the retailer who is a national retailer or a small independent retailer and you as a small business owner. How did you navigate that? Did you feel under pressure to say yes to whatever their terms are? What were the areas that you felt you could negotiate or collaborate on?
Yeah, I think we were in the fortunate position that we launched on the Ignite program, which is built out for emerging brands to give them the opportunity to have in-store presence. So the model is kind of built out to be fair in a way to support brand growth rather than kind of push down the margins like as low as possible to the detriment of the brand. So I think really honing in on that kind of long-term partnership aspect. This is a partnership that you're hoping to carry on for years and years. So really having those conversations at the forefront is important. But we were in the fortunate position in that the model of Ignite has been built out to be fair for both sides because they know the support that kind of a smaller brand would need. I would also just add to Ning's point, because although we were approached by Boots, we of course still had to kind of pitch ourselves to them. And interestingly, I went to a talk recently with Margaret from Space and K, and she was saying, if I see one more deck that's full of product USPs, I'm going to go mad. The number of decks and pitches I sit through where the founder or someone from the team won't even mention the word customer. And I was like, that's so true. And she was like, I don't even want to hear that your customer segments fit ours. I want to know truly who is your customer, who are you targeting them, who are you targeting, how are you targeting them, and then I can assess whether that aligns with our long-term goals as a retailer. And it really made me rethink, rather than trying to sell to them how we could fit in, showcase what we're doing and then let them make the decision if that's going to be the right fit for them. Because as we're saying, in a long-term partnership, you do need to see sell-through, and it might be that that particular retail isn't actually the right match for you in terms of your customer base. So I think learning from those conversations. And then for us with Boots in particular, it was what we can bring to the table. So for us, similarly to Ning, it was that social presence. We might not have, a huge marketing budget, but there are smaller out-of-home things that we can do and facilitate to still bring awareness and drive growth within the category. And I think having a look at the broader category that you sit within, as I've mentioned, we're in accessories, which is kind of a weird little, almost, I hate to say it, outdated niche within Boots. There hasn't been as much progress and development. It's owned by about 3 category leaders within the space. So for us, it was about pitching how we can disrupt that, how we can bring the innovation and the newness to a category that's been quite stagnant. And I think that to them was quite refreshing to see the opportunity. So yeah, maybe just realigning how you're thinking about that process in your head.
Yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate the value that smaller brands can bring to the large incumbents as well, in terms of how you market, how you TikTok shop, how you speak to customers really authentically and have that relationship. They're not able to do that a lot of times as well as you can. So I think that collaboration opportunity is really, really important. I imagine a lot of people are crazily trying to Google Boots Ignite program. So I think the best thing to do, and Sonia, if you could just help, is Grace Vernon looks after everything Ignite. So we'll put her LinkedIn onto the chat. Ignite, you still approach Boots. It's a process by which they can offer better experiences for new, trending, smaller brands getting into Boots. But if you search for Boots Ignite, you might not find an application page.
Yeah, sorry, that's true.
One thing to question for both of you is, when you're first pitching to a retailer, so what your TikTok shop rates are, what your direct consumer trends are, and predictive sales, but actually you've never done retail. So how do you start to forecast what you're likely to sell into retail in a way that's convincing, realistic, appropriate?
Yeah, it's a real challenge. I think for us, especially as a brand with no prior experience to that, it was asking the questions. And I think often in those circumstances, especially as you say, there's a power play at hand with such a huge retailer like Boots. But it was asking that question of what does good and great actually look like to you in terms of sell through? How are you benchmarking that against competitors in the space? What, they're not going to give you the exact data, but what in ballpark are they achieving? What are your hoped for outcomes if we have these 2 slots on shelf? And having that kind of upfront question is really, really important to know what that great looks like to them, because the last thing you want is for them to turn around 3 months in and just say, look, sell through hasn't been where we'd hoped it to be. So we just asked it up front, and it was a daunting kind of answer, but also then we knew in terms of stock, like what we actually needed, and then from a brand side, okay, what do we actually need to do to make sure we can meet that for the retailer as well.
And same question for you, Ning, because I know given your background, science and data must be absolutely critical to your thought process. How did you start with those projections of what the sell-throughs could be, and then day one when you go onto shelf, how did you actually help drive sales in Boots?
I think very same answer that Daisy had, which is really ask all those questions, because even with our previous knowledge within Superdrug, it just works very differently. The way that typically forecast is done is per store, and you won't even know how many products are sold in store. But the other thing that is helpful if you have access to it is data providers like we use NIQ Nielsen. So NIQ does have data around like top performing brands, or even not so much top performing brands, but what the sell through is per category. You can dig in per brand, per store as well. So NIQ is quite helpful. But I think if you don't have NIQ, then again, ask all those questions to your buyer, because it's a symbiotic relationship. And yeah, I think you can also ask what do you expect from us, right? I think a good they actually have those answers, and yeah, I think it would be good to leverage that conversation as Stacey mentioned.
One of the sessions we had, and I think you were with us up in Boots, was the team at Boots who launched Mitchell, made by Mitchell. From the very start, he had a really creative vision of what a launch could be, and it broke pretty much every single rule. It was a very untraditional launch. He wanted to go big, he wanted to go creative, and from his perspective, obviously he had that following and traction already, but it was such a entertaining, creative, exciting, innovative vision that he had, that he managed to get everyone to go along with it at Boots, because they, as people, bought into doing something very different and outside the box. And I think that's also a negotiation tactic you almost have, is how do you get people really excited about what you're trying to do, and what can you do differently, and how can you engage PR or comms or create new narratives, or try and excite the rest of the people across the business. If you were to start a new brand tomorrow, and you had to go through the same thing, what would you have done differently, Daisy?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because we have actually almost essentially had a bit of a fresh start in this category rebuild, because it was a brand new store space, and it was okay, we know the sell through from the end of gondola unit that we were on. How can we now translate that to kind of a slightly hidden area in the storefront and still build attention? So I would say number one thing, and the Mitchell example is perfect, you have to build demand ahead of retail. I think launching into retail too soon without the proven demand is going to leave the buyer unsatisfied and also you as a brand owner in a very compromised position. So I feel like doing the utmost you can to build demand internally as much as you can ahead of that retail is you're in a slightly different position maybe if you've got a lot of upfront investment, but we've been fully bootstrapped, so for us it was all about how can we build that as much as possible. And then it's actually getting yourself in store. And I think I didn't spend long enough looking at, particularly for a boots, the categories, because actually how we've built our MPD internally was not utilized towards retail. Looking at how the store's laid out, we've got some products sitting in a hair care category, some products that sit in accessories, our mascaras sit in cosmetics. And actually, when you're trying to then approach a retailer like Boots with a kind of robust pitch, they're picking apart already, well, actually, that's going to sit in one sort of buyer and that's going to sit in another. And that's not a problem, but just really understanding, okay, is this model built out for retail or is it built out for D2C? And is there a way we can kind of combine both? So for me, having a think about that. And thirdly, when you are in that retail space, really look around at the brands and the products that are standing out to you on shelf. And that was one of my biggest learnings from that initial Ignite launch we had. The product just didn't stand out enough. If I walked past that and had not heard of it as a brand and had no idea what a lash growth serum was, there is nothing that was going to make me stop and understand why I should pick up that product. So when we actually relaunched into category, we built out a whole custom pack, especially for retail. And it had every single clinical trial stat on it. It had a before and after. It had a photo of my face. It said TikTok viral product on. And I just thought, how in this limited space and capacity we have in accessory, can I put every single call out onto this pack? Otherwise, we're just going to blend into the massive pink packs on shelf and not hit the sell through that the buyers are hoping. So I really think spend some time in store and utilize it as market research, and the colors and, you know, the statements that are standing out to you. Think, why is that happening? Why would that get me to stop and reflect for a moment? And is there a way I can integrate that into my own branding before it's too late? If you've got 100,000 units sat in stock, you can't really go and do a brand new pack for retail. So that's something.
So think like a customer, think like a buyer.
Yeah.
Ning, same question for you. If you had to do it all again, what would you have done differently?
I think from my perspective, a slightly different approach. I do agree with Daisy that, you know, we also do skincare, and with skincare, it's a very different buyer. But with cosmetics, our buyer, when we first started out, really had conviction on certain products that she wanted listed on the trays, on at the end trays. And for retail, actually, it's a real estate play. So if you don't have complete conviction of the product selection, because you know your brand the best, you know the sell-through rates, you know which products resonates with the consumers most. I wish I had been a little bit more pushy and around product selection, because ultimately our top 10 bestsellers have been consistently the same for the past 2 to 3 years. So we, you know, we if you can, you know, make sure you point out to the buyers around, here's where we have complete conviction. These are our sell-through rates. This is where, you know, where we anticipate that that these are the top shelves should be dominated with our bestsellers. And instead of just one single row, there should be 2 rows, because the way you think about retail and being in store is that it's really real estate. The more you sell on that real estate, the better your performance is overall. So that for me is something that I would have pushed more for. And I think as a new brand coming in, really make sure you understand all costs. So not just the payment terms, because this will really impact cash flow, but then there are chargebacks, promos, logistical costs that could come with a buy plan. So just make sure that if you are planning a promo, let's say, Boots Love, so 3 for 2, that you also incorporate that in terms of your forecasts, ensure that you can afford it, but also understand that from an operational perspective, uh, you need to make sure that when you ship out goods to Boots, that you understand really all the chargebacks back to front, because when we started out, we had quite a few chargebacks. So yeah, it's just one of those things that it's operations is boring, but it isn't when it hits the bottom line.
I have so many more questions, but I will stop because I can see some really interesting questions coming up in the chat. Before we go to the chat, two things is as part of the Breakout Beauty UK program, which launches tomorrow, which I'll give another plug to. We go through all of this. We demystify the entirety of what retail is, how to win at retail, the process to go through, what retailers expect, what to put into retail pack, what is an FDSU versus a chargeback versus everything else. But we also help founders get through how to raise money so that you can actually afford to get into the retail. What's a sustainable marketing plan so you can continue to create that demand and then create the sell-throughs, and how you raise your profile so that you're getting on the right retailers. What's what I'm looking for? On their agenda.
Yeah.
It's not agenda, but it's close enough. So please feel free to apply. As I said, Sonia has put details in the chat. It's completely free to apply and to participate on. We've got incredible people supporting you, the best in the industry, I think, coming in. So Sonia, lots of questions. I'm going to ask you to curate some of them. And I did see someone ask about cash flow. And I know that unit economics is one that Ning likes to talk about as well. So I might weave that in.
That'd be great. And actually, we're getting a couple really specific questions, which I think are great, which I think everyone will get a benefit from. And I'm going to try and combine a couple. Let's see how we do. And I will go back to that cash flow question, but also just a couple more about units of sales. So our first question is both to Daisy and Ning. Do we have any, I guess, knowledge on if you needed specific units of sales or by on annual that, or you need to have a top seller to be accepted by Boots? Was there anything, and I guess with that in mind, what were the top 3 things that you needed to make sure you had ready to be retail ready before approaching to Boots? So first element is, did you need to have a specific unit or sales to be, or have a top seller to be accepted? If not, if yes, what were also the top 3 things to be retail ready in Boots? Ning, if you want to start.
I don't think they ever disclose in terms of the unit quantities on how many units you need to sell. And I think it's quite also specific to the category that you fall under. Or it could be a completely new product, which it's totally not does not exist on the Boots shelf yet. So I don't think that is particularly important. But if you're in a hyper competitive space, like for instance where we are, it definitely does help to pull some stats to get the attention of the buyer. Like, we sell one every minute. We sell one every minute of our setting mist, our Wishery setting mist, and those stats, gets the attention of buyers. Or you could do what sometimes what we do is we pull out stats on a growing category. For us, we are really strong in setting mist, so we really emphasize based on research that growth in the market of setting mist. So a setting mist had a growth of 40% in, I don't know, 2024 to 2025. We always like to outline that and outline how you're making a dent in that specific category, right? So I think that is quite helpful and useful, but I don't think you need a specific percentage or specific number to get Boots' attention.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, because people were wondering if you needed a certain units of a top seller. But with that in mind, to extend that, Daisy, do you have any other, I guess, top three or top one onto how that you wanted to make sure your brand would be retail ready before approaching Boots?
Yeah, I would say it's really interesting that as part of this program that you will explore kind of that investment option or making sure cash wise you're ready, because it is an investment and you need to have the stock. I think that's the biggest thing. If you do see a positive impact in kind of sell through, you need to make sure you have the stock to sustain that. And often with particularly Boots, but any retailer, the payment terms can be challenging. And at times you could be looking at 90 days, you could be looking at 180 days, like you could be looking at quite severe payment terms. So you need to make sure your cash flow forecast is in place to prepare you for that as a brand, so that it isn't then impacting your other key channels, because ultimately retail should be there to support your other channels, halo effect and leverage that, as opposed to drain all of your resources and then not have a product left. So I think for us that's the big thing. And it's exactly as Ning was saying, it's a retail game, it's a retail space. So the expectation on sell through when we had an end of gondola full shelf, as opposed to we're now on a Euro hook within the accessories category, is going to be different. So you need to look at the amount of space you're taking up on shelf and then the predicted volume that they'd be hoping to see. I do know that to have a listing online with Boots, they are typically looking for about £1,000 in GMV per week, I want to say, but don't fully quote me on that. I'm obviously not from Boots myself. But if a listing online only is not hitting that threshold, the online team will then start to question the buyers. Why is this taking up a listing space online? So again, it's super hard to say because it will completely differ depending on the category. But that's where you have those open questions, and that's where I really feel like it is so important to build demand ahead of that. As Ning's saying, if you can say, you know, we have sold X amount of this on this particular channel, or over our lifetime we have sold X number of this specific unit, and give the ratios of kind of your key hero products and where to kind of push certain products. In particular for us, we have about I'm going to say 70-30 off the top of my head, but split between our lash and brow serum. So we made sure within our pitch that we were strongly pushing towards that hero SKU where we know we can drive more sales, and that product needs to take up more shelf space than the other. So yeah,
I think with Boots, it's very hard to capture anyone's attention, a buyer's attention. They get inundated with pitches and emails and LinkedIn messages and TikToks and everything else. Grace from Boots talked about a fantastic example of a brand. I'm going to try and anonymize this as much as possible. A brand that had come in, not from the UK, that hadn't really been on anyone's radar. And slide 2 was just 8 to 10 stats to say, we're the biggest category seller. We're the biggest seller in this category. This has been our growth in revenue year on year. Here are our TikTok growth stats, and here's the engagement rates. Now, sort of a number of stats. So immediately she's like, I'm interested, because these people have demonstrated from the very first that they've got really high demand, and the UK is a great market. To Ning's point, if you can sit down with a buyer and build relationship and build rapport and get them interested and invested in your brand and your story, that's great. But if they're looking at a retail pitch or a doc, and honestly they're skipping past, on the train on the way to work, you don't have as much time to capture their imagination and their investment into your brand.
I also think, sorry, just to add on that slightly, if you can also, as Ning was saying, look at other regions, like for us in particular, it was about that lash serum category and showcasing the year-on-year growth, particularly in the US, because we know that trends will usually follow suit. And the same can be obviously said for C Beauty now and K Beauty. So if you can showcase a trend in a particular region, and the fact that the strong likelihood is that the UK are going to catch up on that, it also is a good way to showcase demand, even for a category, even if you don't have it for your product in the space yet.
Great. And I think You know, I think a good question to follow from this is, and actually a question that I think many founders have asked us in the past is, how do you, as a small brand, differentiate in boots when you are competing against, these big mega brands with maybe the massive marketing budgets? Um, Ning, maybe to start off with you, what are your thoughts, or I guess what was your strategy there on how you thought you were going to differentiate yourself and really be noticed by Boots?
Mm, I think ultimately, and this is one that every founder out there can do, is that you can really differentiate yourself by bringing in your founder story. I think um, a lot of bigger brands out there, they don't have that human connection. So that's something that you can already do and resonate with day one. And then also, you know, I think it's very helpful to walk through the aisles of that retailer that you really want to capture and show and really put down notes on why you think you look different, you would perform better, or if it simply does not exist on the shelf yet, to demonstrate why it should, right? By way of proof of demand that you might already see on your D2C platforms. So I mean that's something that I love doing. I just love going through the aisles. But then also I think um, ultimately, pulling differentiation, whether it's how you look, your founder story, or your price point, that can also bring you to the attention of buyers. But ultimately, yeah, I think you really want to make sure you think about which retailer you want to be on, because it's not a one shoe fits all. And like I mentioned, we were not shelf ready in 2019. So while being on retail might seem like it is, you'll be successful overnight. Retail just amplifies for me what's already working, but it doesn't create it. So if you're not already selling on D2C or elsewhere, being on a retail shelf won't fix that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. The only thing I was going to maybe add to that as well is customer. So for us, we have so much social interaction with our customer base. It was really kind of understanding that and how we can unlock that within the support of the retail landscape as well. So we did quite a few low cost but high attention grabbing, I guess, campaigns when we initially launched into Boots. We did a UK roadshow, which the only upfront cost to me was traveling to different Boots across the UK, bringing a member of my team. And we just posted it on social and said, whoever are the top 10 people to come and meet us in store at this time on this day, if they purchase one of our serums, we will give them this as a free gift with their purchase. And to be honest, we just facilitated that all ourselves. Didn't kind of, well, we were recommended by the Ignite team to kind of ask for permission later and just go ahead and see what we can do. But it was really low budget for us. It also gave us the opportunity to have that kind of in-person meet and greet aspect with our community and customer directly. And again, it's just a way that we could kind of push the momentum through socials. And also for me as a founder, there was a lot of key learnings about our customer insights from those like physical opportunities to meet our customer as well. So utilizing that and maybe ahead of those, if you are a brand getting started, it's how can you have those kind of in-person opportunities with customers before retail as well, because I really did learn so much from that. And even now we do kind of just a walk around Battersea Park and and we'll get people a coffee, but it's a real great opportunity to walk and talk with your direct customer and you learn so much from them.
That's a really good point. So Ning, you obviously nailed it on TikTok Shop. And I guess when you're D2C or when you've got a platform that is so in front of your customer, you get to know your customers insanely well, either from a data and insights perspective or just anecdotally the people who love your product and buy your products. And then when it goes into retail, you're kind of losing that direct access. What was the implications to you as a brand and as a business where you're scaling, but how do you maintain that relationship with your customers so that you understand new opportunities, what's working, what's not working, what you can do differently?
I think honestly, the way we do that, I mean, we want to do more of what Daisy's doing, but I think where we don't do that, we actually see that through sales data, and are very reactive when it comes to what we put on the shelves and what we pull. So weekly sales data is really key for us to understand what's really resonating. If like you're seeing zero sales for a particular SKU, you need to understand why there's just that zero sales. Number one, is it even on the shelf? Sometimes, when you do retail rollout, things do get missed. So it's really important for you to go in store. And part of being in visiting those stores for us is having conversations with the sales reps. So um, the sales women and men that are in the Boots beauty halls, they actually know incredible amount of what goes on within your brand. They would tell you, oh, it's because you're doing this promo on TikTok Shop and it's selling a lot cheaper. That's why no one's touching that SKU. So they know so much about the business, and then also there's also ways to also understand, okay, the product is it's not on does not sell on the shelf, then you need to be really reactive, and create a promo plan with your buyer, or just when the next swap outs, you need to make sure those SKUs are pulled out ASAP. Because ultimately you don't want, again, it's a real estate play. You want to make sure you have your best-selling SKUs there.
And so Boots has 1,300 independent beauty specialists across their stores. So these people, beauty brands inside out. I'd recommend you go and speak to them about the competition, about the potential, about your customers. Sonia, we've got a couple of minutes left.
Yes. And actually, I was hoping I could sneak in one more question. And I thought maybe to steer it to a different direction. Somebody asked about packaging, which I actually think is an important topic to talk about for people that want to go into retail. So maybe Daisy, what has anything happened throughout your trajectory of going into retail where you've had to update your packaging? Um, and if so, what prompted that change? What has your packaging actually gone through whilst you were been getting ready to go into retail?
Yeah, so when we launched into a full shelf. So also to give a bit of insight, you do pay for those shelves, and I wasn't quite aware of that in the upfront. So this is where we say there has to be a level of investment available. And as Ning has mentioned, you do need to have that reserve because you could have losses, you could have promotional periods running, and you will have to fund that difference. So it's a good thing to be aware of within the model. But when we initially launched, it was into a shelf with kind of fixed standing areas for product. And for us, it was about having those key call outs. But one of my biggest learnings was that the call outs was on the shelf itself in terms of PDPs, but not on the actual product. So by the time someone picked up that product, it was almost not connecting with the key call outs were on the shelf. So then when we launched into the category, we shifted from kind of a freestanding box to what they call a Euro hook, which is where it's got a hook feature that can go directly onto the shelf. So automatically that meant that we were going to have to do a form of a repack to make sure it was suitable for the destination. But we saw that as an opportunity to change kind of some of the key elements within the design to make sure it had those call outs that I mentioned of clinical stats before and afters, any kind of those unique selling points that you initially pitching to a retailer opportunity to do so.
Amazing. I think we may have just missed the last piece, but I'm sure we'll come back to it. Ning, I thought I wanted to end with you, same question, and then I think from there we can close the webinar. But we want to hear also your insights around packaging.
Oh my gosh, how long do you have? Because we've had so many mistakes, over the past 12 years. But, in terms of retail, it actually emphasizes, we were a small brand. So as we grew each SKU, let's say of a same category, setting mist, um, it really outlines when you go in store, are the fonts aligned? Do they actually call out what each product does, and does it differentiate between an existing product? And why should a customer choose this mist over the other? What is the function? So, yeah, I think as much as possible, yeah, I always encourage just align your products. Make sure again you know it it pulls out the best points of each product. Just like Daisy said, what tweaks we did was like for each setting mist, we created a sticker label on the cap that says, this is for a 16-hour hold, this is for mattifying, this is for glass skin finish. So it really is very easy to digest for the customer, and they're not confused when they go in store. But being completely frank and candid, we don't have that pat down as perfectly as I want it just yet. But it's a growing process, and yeah, as you extend your product offering with the retailers, it's something that you just get better at.
Amazing. Well, first of all, I want to say thanks both for today. Paul, I thought before we finish, I don't know if there's any closing remarks we're really keen to finish on. I think we can dedicate 5 more minutes. I know we've missed a couple of minutes here and there, which is no problem at all, but I don't know if, first of all, Paul, are you there?
Yes, we are.
Okay,
We're,
great. Okay.
we're
Top
in
notch.
and out. We're skulking in. So,
Yeah.
closing remarks. I think, first of all, thank you very much for your patience. I'm sorry about the terrible Wi-Fi we've had. Thank you very much, Ning and Daisy, for all of your fantastic insight and help. It's been wonderful. I think, yeah, if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to reach out. So if you look me up, I'm Paul Finch on LinkedIn under Growth Studio. We're going to have many more of these types of webinars. A lot of webinars we have coming up are going to be around how to raise investment, how to get money so you can actually afford to go into retail. We've got another Ask Me Anything session around how to get into the program and what we'll be looking for. Sonia will be sending all the links underneath, but please just reach out. Keep an eye on our socials. If you follow Breakout Beauty on LinkedIn, you'll be seeing everything that we're doing. We've got loads more webinars, loads more sessions. And I think for me, the single greatest bit of advice that I've heard from founders and retailers is build that relationship. Retailers are in this to make something that works longer term. They want it to make it work. So start early, start sort of aligning what you want to do and what they want and what they need, and build something together that works for both parties.
Mm. Yes, exactly. And actually, just to add to Paul's point, I have shared all the links if you want to follow us on our socials. I've also shared, as we mentioned, applications are opening tomorrow. So if you are somebody who's keen to apply, please pre-register your interest and we will send you in your inbox as soon as those applications open. And last thing from me as well is, as a reminder, we will have a sort of survey that will pop up after this call. And I would really love it if everyone took less than a minute to fill it out, because actually we take on the feedback from these forms and create our next webinar topics. So the one that's coming up on if you're ready for investment is kind of created on the basis of all the feedback we've collected this far. So we don't ignore these, we definitely act on them. So I'd really love to hear what everyone else's thoughts are and what they want to hear for the next webinars. But without further ado, I'm going to extend my thanks one more time. Thanks everyone for your patience, but the show kept going and it was great to hear from the both of you, Ning and Daisy. Thank you. And we'll catch you again in Breakout Beauty UK 2026.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. Take
Thank
care.
you. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.